Ready? All right, so it is time for us to begin. I forgot to ask anybody to lead the word of prayer. Maybe here in a minute. Would anybody mind? Maybe just a minute, but anybody mind leading the prayer here in a minute? Rodney's looking both ways. Make it him. So he had the most movement. So, but if you want to, it's good to see everybody this morning. Glad to be here with everyone. If you want to go ahead and turn in your Bibles over to Judges chapter 17, that's where we're going to be here this morning in the context of our study. And I think, it's really an interesting chapter, a few chapters, right, in the Bible when we get to chapter 17. If you remember, the last couple of weeks, we spent a lot of time with Samson in our narrative as we go through a lot of these things. All the things that Samson did to the Philistines, all the things that the Philistines did to Samson as he began to save Israel, as the text says in there. But Samson is 12 for 12, right? We've looked at every single one of the judges already, from Othniel to Samson in this study so far. 6 major judges, 6 minor judges. Again, not by importance, but just by how much we know about them, right? 6, we had a lot of text. 6 of them we really kind of pass over with just 1 or 2 sentences of those. And we've seen that spiral over and over again of the judges cycle, where there's sin and there's rescue and there's calling out of God, all those things that come into place with this, and that downward trajectory as we've been going through, that the people get a little bit worse, a little bit worse, and a little bit worse through all these things. But when we get to chapter 17, we've got 5 chapters left. If you think about it in terms of just pure numbers of chapters in the book of, it's not quite this much if you just looked at like volume, but just pure numbers of text, it's about 25% of the chapters are still left, and we're done with all of the judges. So it kind of begs the question, right? Is what's going on here in the book of Judges? What does the author want us to know? Apart from these cycles, apart from the judges themselves, what does God want us to know about Him, about His people, about ourselves, even in some of these things? So that's what we're going to be looking at today and Wednesday. Again, grateful for Daniel for trading a little bit in terms of classes here. So just on our schedule, these last 5 chapters we'll be covering today and Wednesday, and that'll close out our class on the book of Judges. And then after that, next week, we'll close out on everything for the practical Christianity class. So Sunday and Wednesday next week, Daniel will be up here. And then after that will be our group teach quarter. So there's a couple things going on in that quarter to look for. I know Daryl's going to be teaching Zechariah in here on Wednesday nights. So I think, when do you want people to pick up material, by the way, Daryl? Is it any time, or is it a... They're back there. They're back there. So I didn't move it. There's a piece of paper over it hiding it in that box. But there's Zechariah material over there that'll be in a couple of weeks from now that's sitting on the floor. As we start to get to those things. And then the group teach quarter will start in, it's 2 weeks from today. It'll start in here. So that one, I'll just put a plug in for it just for a second. That's always one of my favorite quarters in here. So the intention is 13 different classes, 13 different men. This year we'll be looking at minor Bible characters or unsung heroes. There's some material that we have there digitally we'll be getting out. But 13 different lessons of these sort of minor Bible characters as we look through some of that in that quarter. So that'll all be upcoming. But let's go ahead and go to God in prayer, Rodney, if you don't mind, and we'll get started this morning.
Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we come before you today, thanking you for this opportunity to be here, thanking you for another day to live and to enjoy the wonders of your blessings that you give to us, and the grace that we find in our lives. We ask at this time, as we come together to study your word, that you will help us learn the lessons you would have us do in the book of Judges, that we will not follow their pattern, except that we our salvation and our good. All this we ask and say in Jesus' name.
Amen. All right, so I want to put up this, we'll probably put it up one more time, but this is our outline that we've been looking at a little bit in the book of Judges. And we're finally down to this last sort of rectangle, that sort of orange rectangle in the bottom, where with the last 5 chapters left, we're done with the Judges, and we get this sort of double conclusion that I'll call it. We had sort of that double introduction at the beginning of the book, and this book is very symmetric that way. And we get this double conclusion that comes into place at these last 5 chapters. And the way that this conclusion happens, it's not a big commentary about things. There's some famous one-line things about being right in their own eyes and there's no king in Israel, but that's really the only commentary that's made it through here. We get this big, long narrative over 5 chapters in the book of Judges. And it comes in to us in 2 stories that are here. So we'll cover the first story today, and then we'll look at the second story on Wednesday night. And I got to tell you, Wednesday especially, it's a tough story. There's some really terrible, terrible things that are going on with the people of Israel, and the things that are happening, and what people do to each other and by each other in these stories. That's in here, but we're going to kind of see that it's really symmetric in the book of Judges. So if you remember back to the sort of the beginning introductions, we kind of saw things that were happening in society from a big macro view picture. That there was all these foreign influences coming involved, and the people started failing and not doing what God said, tribe by tribe by tribe. They failed to drive out, failed to drive out, failed to drive out. We saw that. So at the end of the book, we're going to see sort of that societal decline. At the end of the book, we'll see a story that really talks about the societal collapse in that way. And I've kind of come to think of this. I remember being a kid and my dad watching some Johnny Carson kind of stuff. And Johnny Carson, I think he would do this a lot. I just remember this. I probably should have looked it up. But he would say something like, it's really hot, and people would say, how hot is it? And then he'd give like a little illustration of it's so hot that a fire hydrant flagged down a dog or something like that, right? And those kind of things. And I think these conclusions that are here are kind of like that. Is those foreign influences that happened at the beginning, the very last story about these social things that were going on, how bad did it get? There's a story about how bad it got at the very end of the book of Judges. And then we take one step in for what we're going to be looking at today. When you come to the religious decline, that second introduction is where we saw the cycle. And God said that they're going after these idols and those kind of things in that sort of macro view. Well, we're going to see what's happening in a very personal way, in this story, about what's happening in society or in religious things. And it's really a religious collapse that's going on. These people really don't know who God is, and I think we see that as we read some of these things. One other thing I want to read before we kind of jump into some of this stuff, I think it helps keep our minds in some of this, and I'll just read. There's a lot of passages we could read from, a lot of things in Deuteronomy that I wanted to read from. I think chapter 12 kind of sums up some of these things. But these first, I think, 8 verses through here. These are the statutes and the rules that you shall be careful to do in the land of the Lord, the God of your fathers, has given you to possess. All the days that you live on earth, you shall surely destroy all the places where the nations whom you shall dispossess serve their gods on the mountains and on the hills and under every green tree. It's one of the things, by the way, they were worshiping every place. When God says, this is the place. This is the place that I want you to worship me. You shall tear down their altars and dash in pieces the pillars and burn their Asherim with fire. You shall chop down the carved images of their gods and destroy their name out of that place. You shall not worship the Lord your God in that way. But you shall seek the place that the Lord your God will choose out of all the tribes to put his name and make his habitation there. There you shall go, and there you shall bring your burnt offerings and your sacrifices, your tithes, the contribution that you present, your vow offerings, your free will offerings, your firstborn of the herd and your flock. And there you shall eat before the Lord your God, and you shall rejoice in your household, and that you undertake, in which the Lord your God has blessed you. You shall not do according to all that we are doing here today, everyone doing what is right in their own eyes. Dropping down to verse 28. Be careful to obey all these words that I command you, that it may go well with you and for your children after you forever, when you do what is good and right in the sight of the Lord your God. That's their mission that they had. This is Moses saying these things right before they walked into the promised land, right before they took these things out. And that place they mentioned, by the way, God's gonna mention that later. He doesn't name it in the book of Deuteronomy, but it's going to be Jerusalem. Right now it's Shiloh. And that'll come into play at the end of this. But right now it's Shiloh, and that's where the tabernacle is. That's the place God says to worship all these things, that you're to be different. So we'll put a pin in those things and keep those in mind as we go through here. But I think that's a good framing, because these stories that we're talking about, they don't just jump out and list all the things that are wrong. You just see them over and over again in these stories. So a quick outline of what we're looking through. Chapter 17, we're going to see Micah and this Levite that come into play. It's going to start with a theft. It's a really interesting place to start a story. But it's going to start with a theft. Micah steals from his mother. We're going to see his mother's response, which is super interesting. Micah finds religion, which is not a good thing in this case. Verse 5 and 6. And then we see this live-in Levite. He's going to have a personal priest that comes in place at the end of chapter 17. And chapter 18 is all about the Danites and them taking what they want. That goes in here. So we see the mission that they're on. They have an interesting what's going on. And all these people, by the way, are trying to solve their own problems. And we see they're doing what's right in their own eyes in this way. But they send out 5 spies. They steal Micah's idols. So Micah starts by stealing. Dan's going to steal these idols in this worship center. And the Levite, for that matter, going to steal these things. And then Micah follows after Dan. We see, I don't know if I'd call it a confrontation, but he catches up to him. And then we see the city of Dan established. So we're talking about, the city of Dan gets used for the topmost part of Israel. But that's not where their land was given. We see that being established here in that sort of thing. And it was established on the back of idols, which is really interesting to know when you know the history of Dan in some of these things. So another way to look at this, I saw this one last night and just want to kind of put it out there. I think it's an interesting way to think about the story that we're looking at today in some of this is there's sort of an escalation that happens. So if you chart these 2 chapters at least, if we talk about their moral corruption on the side and time as it goes on, we're going to see the first 5 or 6 verses. It's just Micah that's in place here. And then we're going to see Micah and the Levite and what they do in some of this. And then we're going to see Micah, Levite, and the whole tribe of Dan that come into play. So you see this kind of escalation happens. It gets bigger and bigger as things go on in this chapter. And we also get sort of these markers, these flags that come into place, which is the real famous verses in the book of Judges, that every time there's an escalation in here, we see these phrases get mentioned again, right? That this is kind of the only commentary we have in some of this. In those days, there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And then we see what that means for Micah and the Levite, right? There was no king in Israel, so we see what happened. What did Dan do about that? And in this case, might makes right, and they do what they want to in some of this. And we see how far away they get from God. I don't know why that's like that. That's okay. Hopefully we'll get past it. Maybe. I don't know why. If that's a loop. Okay. We're done with that. All right. So let's go ahead and get into the text. Let's read. We'll spend more time on these first 6 verses than we will the back half of some of these things. But does somebody mind being a reader for these first 6 verses? Ken, if you don't mind, and I'll get you next, Jason.
There was a man of the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Micah. And he said to his mother, 1,100 pieces of silver, about which you uttered a curse, and also spoke it in my ear. Behold, the silver is with me, I took it. And his mother said, Blessed be my son by the Lord. And he
Do we, tag team, I like that. So, thank you, Dick.
Now therefore I will restore it to you. So when he restored the money to his mother took 200 pieces of silver and gave it to the silversmith, who made it into a carved image in a metal image. And it was in the house of Micah. And the man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and household gods, and ordained one of his sons, who became his priest. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes.
Okay, so I think that's self-explanatory. We'll move on, those kind of things. But I like this. Art uses this phrase sometimes, but there's a lot of Bible scholars in this room. Those kind of things. Did anybody notice anything wrong with this when we meet Micah, this man from Ephraim? Yeah, like, so this is interesting. There's so many things wrong with this, and it builds off of, there's wrongness on top of wrongness, I think, and then there's little side wrongnesses, I think, that are in here, all in these first 6 verses. I didn't actually count them. I probably should have. Yeah, buddy.
This interesting fact, now he's got to look at this idol that he knows was made from the money he stole from his mother. Like, it's a reminder every time he looks at it, but he doesn't see it that way.
Yeah.
He sees it as
There's so many things laced through this wrongness that exists, it was born out of wrongness, I think is a big part of what's happening in this. So we meet this man Micah. He's in the country of Ephraim, this hill country. By the way, that's gonna. I should have put a map up here. When we get to a map, about halfway through, got a map. I want to point some things out. I think that's significant too, that it's in Ephraim right now. But we come to this 1,100 pieces of silver. Does that bring up anything to anybody's mind right now? Very specific number. This is the exact same number of that we studied last week or the week before, I can't remember, that Delilah got paid from each of the Philistine lords. And we talked about it then. Micah's going to offer this priest for a yearly wage 10 pieces of silver. So it's real hard to say how much is this stuff worth, right? You know, in today's dollars, all that kind of stuff. But he's going to offer him 10 pieces of silver at the end of this thing. So if you take that as a year's wage, we're talking 100 years' wage, right, that he stole. So it starts off with a guy stealing from his mom. And he doesn't sound like a little kid in some of these things, how those things. And she utters a curse with this, but when she finds out that it's her son, she goes, well, bless him, right? You know, bless his heart in these things. So she tries to reverse that into a blessing from the Lord, which is interesting. Anybody have any thoughts about the mother's reaction to this? It's interesting. Daniel, and then Art.
I was just going to say, I think sometimes you see that with people. You'll see them condemn wrong, but then when they find out maybe it's a family member committing that wrong, they'll change their tune. So
Yes.
be careful of that.
Yes, and maybe it's easier to talk about it when you see people with maybe like little kids or something like that, like the kid can't do wrong somehow, or when they find out it was their kid, you know, all of a sudden it's not so bad. But this gets serious really quick. When we get to Wednesday, when we're talking about some of this stuff, there's tribes that they realize they're going to try to right a wrong by killing other people and kidnapping wives, all kinds of stuff that they're going to do to try to right some of these things because they realize, hey, we're part of that family, and they justify all kinds of things in that. Do you have something, Art?
Oh yeah, I think Jen and I commented and said it was looking at her parenting style, it is shocking that her son has turned out the way he has. But that being said, it's interesting to me how people do create their own problems. And it is this part of this picture of when you leave God behind, this is what life looks like. And people can look around and say, why is this happening to me? Why are these things happening? Why are that? And as Christians, God has taken us and plucked us from that fire. And we can look from the outside and go, we know why all of it's happening.
Yeah.
We know every step of this, why you're dealing with this. And it's because you did what was right in your own eyes. You're not following after God.
Yeah. And there's a relationship-based righteousness here, I think, that happens, right? Because of the relationship, things change. You're either cursed or blessed. Yeah.
I don't think the first, second, third, fourth, fifth point of this is that they're rich, but they are. Like, they are not lacking for anything.
Micah's got some money. Yeah. Yeah, he's for sure. right? If he's got 100 years' wage of anybody's that's sitting in the bank or underneath the rug or whatever you want to say, that his mom has to steal. Obviously, she noticed it, those kind of things, but they have some money. And this is, during the time of Judges, was not a rich time for the people of Israel, right? So that's very true. And you notice the mother's response too in here that she says, well, I'm going to dedicate this silver to the Lord. God's mentioned a lot actually in this. And one of the things I think is really interesting, by the way, is these people are still religious. These people are still religious. But she says, I'm going to dedicate the silver to the Lord. And 2 points I think are kind of interesting out of that. She does this and she says, you know what I'm going to do with that? You know, there's this wrongness that's happened. I want to counteract that curse. It seems like it's kind of what's going on in here. Well, I know what we're going to do to get that blessing is we're going to make a carved image. And we're going to make a molten image. Very thing, like go to Deuteronomy chapter 27. That's one of the literal things. A carved image or a cast metal image is an abomination to the Lord. The thing by the hands of its craftsmen is set up in secret. The people shall answer amen. But God is literally saying at the beginning of chapter 27, cursed is the man. So she's setting up for a blessing, what God has set up for a curse. And the other thing that I think is super interesting in this is she goes and she says, you know what, I'm going to dedicate this to God. And it looks like the whole thing at the beginning of the verse. And then when it comes down to it in the craftsman, even though she's doing this wrong thing, layers on layers, she goes, 200. That's enough. That's a big enough idol, right? In some of these things. So it's even less. At least I do, kind of get the Ananias and Sapphira sort of vibe that goes on here on some of these things. But again, it's just wrongness layering on top of each other with all these little things. Yeah, Danielle.
To me, like, even throughout all of Judges, it's a perfect example of how some people think, well, I'm giving to God. But it's, I mean, even now, people, well, I'm doing good or I'm doing what, you know, I'm supposed to, but it's not enough if you're not following exactly as God says. Like, they think they're doing enough. They think they're, you know, I mean, not obviously in denial, but, you know, she's trying to bless and, you know, do her own in the same.
That's huge. Like, what does it take? What is worship, right? In some of these ways. Micah is worshiping. And they're spending money, and they're doing, this thing started out of this stuff. So if you imagine, so here's the thing. If you imagine like today, we live in a society where if we saw Micah doing this, here's a guy that started out stealing from his mother, and now look at all the things that he's done on this. He's set up in his house. He's found religion, right? People say this kind of stuff. And look at all the work that he's done. Look at all the sincere things that he's done in this. He's done a ton in this to set up this worship center, this idol center. You know, not only, I think of the word like "and" in all this. Again, it compounds over and over again. Not only has he made these carved images, but now he makes a shrine in his house. Not only has he made the shrine, but he makes an ephod. Alarm bells, Gideon, that's the snare to his family in these things. Not only has he made the ephod, but apparently more household gods. And not only that, but he ordained a priest. He ordained the priest that's in here. We're going to find out later, by the way, and it doesn't come out and explicitly say this, but this guy had no right being a priest. He's of the tribe of Levi, but he's not from Aaron. And all of these kind of things that come into place with this. But all of this is layers and layers and layers and layers. Buddy and then Rich. And did somebody else have something? But I know Buddy and Rich did, right? We'll go from there.
Sorry, this is probably my last one. But 200 pieces of silver. Let's go a little bit. $20,000 a year. That's $400,000 for this item.
It's a lot of money. It's not the 1,100, right? You know, but yeah, it's a lot of money.
Comparatively, it would be exorbitant.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah. He's a patron, right, of things. Like he's got more than this priest is not the only person working for him, I'm sure. Right? In that way. Sort of this community center. That's kind of the picture right now is you get this community center, you get this thing where there's this worship center, and man, how convenient it is. We can just worship right here. In some of this, but you get all these compounding, and then we get this statement, right? Everyone did what was right in their own eyes, and that's why, like, passages like this, Daniel's talking about this kind of thing too. Why does it matter so much what we do for worship? Why does it matter, right? We see all the wrongness in some of these things, and it's easy to point back to like an ancient time, because this is a long time ago, and say, man, that silver idol, that's really bad. But we do the same kind of things. You know, why is it that we can't have pancakes and syrup for the Lord's Supper? Right? Why is that? It's because God didn't say so, right? Why can't we have all kinds of things when it comes to worship? The fact is, and I'm stealing this point from someone, but God defines what's worship. We don't have the right to define what worship is apart from God, and we see that so clearly. I think in like Micah and the things that are wrong in some of these things, and the consequences are eternal, right? Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Those are big words that's here. It doesn't matter that Micah did a lot of work. It doesn't matter that there was blood, sweat, and tears. It doesn't matter his sincerity in those kind of things. Man, he wasn't doing what God said. And that's so scary to us, right? Because I think what we want to do sometimes is, man, they're really sincere. Man, it's something I really want to do. I feel like it's something I could do to help. But if it's not what God prescribed, if it's not what he said honors him, then it doesn't honor him. And if it doesn't honor him, it's not worship. It's more than a waste of time, right? In these things. The consequences are eternal, like Matthew chapter 7. So any comments anybody wants to make about that? Yeah.
I think in today's time, some things can like creep in on us that seem really good, but they're really very tricky. And I mean, just a couple that come to my head, like love is love, or oh, we're supposed to love, but God says that we love all. But there's specific instructions on what we need to tell our brother or sister in Christ, who will know that God can
Yeah.
also.
Yeah.
So there's that scale and the balance that we have to make a determination. We can't just always sit on the fence.
And what a contrast to, right? We've been reading over and over and over and over again in the book of Judges, evil in the sight of the Lord, evil in the sight of the Lord, evil in the sight of the Lord. Now we see what's right in their eyes. What does that evil really look like? It's this. Man, it wasn't that. They were still religious. They were still using God's name. They were still going to things and calling it worship. And I wonder if we just like drove by during that time, how much we would have recognized it as evil as God's been saying in the book of Judges, in some of these things. Let's move on, verse 7 through 13. Somebody mind being the reader for this one? Anybody? Daniel, if you don't mind.
Now there was a young man in Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite, and he sojourned there. And the man departed from the town of Bethlehem in Judah to sojourn where he could find a place. And as he journeyed, he came to the hill country Ephraim, to the house of Micah. Micah said to him, "Where do you come from?" And he said to him, "I'm a Levite of Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm going to sojourn where I may find a place." And Micah said to him, "Stay with me, and be to me a father and a priest, and I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year and a suit of clothes in your living." And the Levite went in. And the Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man became to him like one of his sons. And Micah ordained the Levite, and the young man became his priest, and was in the house of Micah. And Micah said, "Now I know that the Lord will prosper me, because I have a Levite as a priest."
Okay. So knowing the Old Testament, anything wrong with this section? Or are we just good? Anything jump out? Yeah, Rich?
Well, apparently, he didn't think his son was good enough as a priest. So
Well, he leveled up. I feel like this is the next. It's a little closer to God. It does Levite. He's got that right. So it's more acceptable. More acceptable, right?
but nowhere is it from the line of Aaron.
Yeah. But by the way, he's not in one of these 48 cities, by the way, that were given to the Levites, which is interesting. He's sojourning. He's looking for a place. There's a lot of interesting things like that. Again, he's not even supposed to be a priest. He's a Levite, but he's not supposed to be a priest.
The last verse, now I know the Lord will prosper me. He is rich. Like, what is going on in his brain where he doesn't think he's prosperous?
Let's talk about that one. No, you're right. You're right. So, how is he using God? Or Rodney, did you have a different point?
Well, prospering is not always necessarily physical. It could be spiritual prospering. It's, this acceptance with the Lord, but that's not necessarily what he means either. I just think that's a possibility.
Micah knows it, by the way. Man, he knows it. Now I know. You take Micah in some of these things. How is he using God right now? I think using's the right word. He's using God like a genie. You know what? If I do the right thing, if I get the right combination, which isn't even the right combination, right? Like there's layers on all this kind of stuff. But if I hit the right combination to the safe, then God's going to have to do this for me. God's going to, and I know he's going to bless me right now because I got a Levite. I kicked my son out. Now I got this Levite. It's got the word Levite attached to it. I got the right name on the door. I got the right name on the priest, right? That kind of thing. Now I know I'm going to be blessed. We do that same kind of thing too. We can. That's in here. And he goes, now I know. It's kind of like Jephthah, right? How did he entreat the favor of God? I'm going to give this sacrifice first thing that walks out of my house. And you see that picture that's there for these things. And so I do think we're left with this picture in these things that God's a good luck charm, God's a rabbit's foot, right? All those kind of things. If I do what's in my heart, if I do what's right in my own eyes, you do you, if you want to put it in, kind of terms that we think of today, then I know God will accept it. How can he not accept something that's in my heart? Micah knew it in these kind of things. But I think we see God as an afterthought sometimes. I think we see God will just accept what's in my heart kind of things. And man, they're still working. That's the scary thing to me in this is they're still working. He's still got sweat. He's still building these things up. He's still spending money. Like Buddy mentioned, it's not a small amount of money that he's putting in it. He's invested in these things, in some of this. Any other comments with this? Yeah, Art.
I'll just throw this out. I mean, I know it's all in our minds, but in preparation for the different teachers' classes we're doing, Archippus was given a ministry, and Paul reminds him to keep his ministry. And it's interesting that he doesn't say, go find a ministry. He says, fulfill the ministry given to you. That's the difference, I think, in the Lord's people is he's given us what to do.
Yeah.
The problem is the world goes, no, I think I'll just find my own. I think I'll go and do what the Lord lays on my heart, which is a loose translation for I wanna. I feel like I want to do this. And it's like, but that's not what the Lord gave you to do. We have to find our assignment, not just activity. Micah looked great on paper. He was at work doing probably more than, we would look at him and go, man, he's a example for us to follow and work. Look at all the stuff he's doing. I mean, he's so dedicated. But he's not doing the assignment. He's doing activity.
Yeah.
It's different.
I'm gonna skip ahead because I think this fits with kind of like what you're saying here, just for a second. So ignore the rest of this map for a minute. But so we've seen already a couple times it's mentioned that Micah's in Ephraim. And one of the tragic things about this is right now, for where they are right now today, the tabernacle and the place God says to do all these things and true worship should be and all kinds of stuff that he talks about is in Shiloh, which is right there. And the hill country of Ephraim is right there. So all of these things that he's setting up is in the backyard of the tabernacle. He's really, really close in all these things that can happen. And it happens right in the backyard. It happens, all these kind of things. He goes off on his own ministry, not the one that was given to him in these things. And they end up being so far away from God, even though they're so close to some of these things. Other people in the country were not that close. But Micah had a close access to all of these things. and didn't even seem to know his God. So, verse 1 through 6 of chapter 18. Somebody mind being a reader for this one? Rich, if you don't mind.
In those days, there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of the people of Dan was seeking for itself an inheritance to dwell in. For until then, no inheritance among the tribes of Israel had fallen to them. So the people of Dan sent 5 able men from the whole number of the tribe, from Zorah and from Eshtaol, to spy out the land and to explore it. And they said to them, "Go and explore the land." And they came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. When they were in the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite, and they turned aside and said to him, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What is your business here?" And he said to them, "This is how Micah dealt with me. He has hired me, and I have become his priest." And they said to him, "Inquire of God, please, that we may know whether the journey on which we are setting out will succeed." And the priest said to them, "Go in peace. The journey on which you go is under the eye of the Lord."
Okay, so in this section, we see there's this mission. It's going to be a big part of this chapter, that Dan is trying to get an inheritance. They're trying to do something for themselves, by the way. God gave them an inheritance, but what we find out, by the way, in chapter 1, about verse 34, 35, Dan did not do what they were supposed to. In fact, let the people in their own territory grow, where they kicked them out of the territory. So now when we come to this section right here, Dan doesn't have a place to stay. They don't really have an inheritance themselves because they didn't do what God said. And now they're seeking to justify that themselves. And I think it's interesting, as an afterthought, they go, "Oh, well, might as well ask God about what happened." Again, invoking the name of the Lord in here. So because this plays a part, I do think it's interesting to kind of look at the map, right? So if you ever thought about, actually I think I got, okay, so there's Dan, right? There is the territory that God allotted for the people of Dan in there. The tribe of Dan would be there. When we talk about Ephraim, or I'm sorry, the city of Dan, which right now is Laish. It's going to be Laish till the end of this. But that's what's going to become the city of Dan, which is way in the north. So there are extreme sides of the territory that's here. When we talk about Micah, he's in Ephraim, in this hill country. So when Micah comes into play through this, they're on their way back and forth. And in this first trip, they're sending 5 spies out, right? Very reminiscent of other spies that have been sent out, but they're looking for a land. They're looking for these things to do. They're staying with Micah on that way. They recognize this recognize Jonathan's, we find out his name later, Jonathan. Found out Jonathan recognized his voice and talked to him about this and say all those things. So when we get to like the 1st and 2nd Kings and those kind of things, from Dan to Beersheba, right? That's the Dan we're talking about, the city that hasn't been established yet in some of these things. So they ask him to inquire of God, and then the priest says, "Sure, go in peace." Yeah, God's with you. Anything jump out to you about that response, by the way?
It was too quick. He didn't inquire.
I don't know if he prayed or not in some of this, but again, it's a guy that has no business being a priest. He doesn't know enough about God to know that there shouldn't be any idols. There's nothing indicates in the text that they actually did any praying or any of that kind of stuff. But after he talks to him, he goes, "You're good. Go ahead." Is that picture that happens, and he uses that phrase too. Let's see, your journey on which you go under the eye of the Lord. I think it's interesting he uses that phrase, right? Especially in some of this stuff. Any other comments for this one?
And just
Yep.
the priest also would like I thought that kind of gave him some clout in the area.
Yeah. Oh, he's definitely watching his career, right? He's going to get a promotion here in a little bit, right? That he's happy to get. He was glad in his heart to. He's going to graduate from a house priest to a tribe priest, which is a step up in some of these things as they go. Let's see. Tell you what, we won't read this one. Wait. Oh, no, okay, I was back a little forward. So in this one, I won't read some of this, but I'll highlight a couple things. So they departed and they went and saw this city in the north, right, what would be Dan. And it's interesting, they spy it out and they said, this is the place, we got to go after this place. And their reasoning is really interesting to me because they say they follow after the manner of the Sidonians, they're quiet, they're unsuspecting, they lack nothing on the earth, they possess wealth, and they're far from the Sidonians. So it'd be hard for them to get help. They're pretty peaceable people, and they never suspect us coming. That's their reasoning for going in here. Very different from the reasoning God gave for different places in the land that was going in. So that's Dan's reasoning and what's right in their eyes with this. And then they attribute this to God too and say, well, this is the will of God. Because they're unsuspecting, because they're quiet people, because they're far from Sidonians. That's God giving us this thing in these places. And then let's go ahead and read 14 through 20. Somebody mind being a reader here? Jason, would you mind reading again?
Then the 5 men who had gone to scout out the country of Laish said to the brothers, do you know that in these houses there are in household gods, carved image, and a metal image? Now therefore consider what you will do. And they turned aside there and came to the house of the young Levite at the home of Micah and asked him about his welfare. Now the 600 men of the Danites, armed with their weapons of war, stood by the entrance of the gate. And the 5 men who had gone to scout out the land went up and entered and took the carved image, the ephod, the household gods, and the metal image, while the priest stood by the entrance of the gate with the 600 men armed with weapons of war. And when these went into Micah's house, took the carved image, the ephod, the household gods, and the metal image, the priest said to them, what are you doing? And they said to him, keep quiet, put your hand on your mouth, and come with us, and be to us a father and a priest. Is it better for you to be priest to the house of one man, or be priest to a tribe and clan in Israel? And the priest's heart was glad. He took the ephod and the household gods, the carved image, and went along with the people.
So you see the escalation, by the way, in some of this? Started with stealing from his mother, and let's turn it into a blessing. Now let's build a shrine. Now let's have a worship center. Now let's have a priest. And now Dan's stealing these things. They come with 600 fighting men. And they walk in and take all these things, take these gods. That's the thing they want to take, right? In some of this. And he asked him what he was doing. Isn't it better that you level up? Right? If it was good to have a Levite priest in there, now, hey, isn't it good to be a tribe? You see the reasoning in that. He was glad. That sounds really good. This is a promotion in some of these things. That was actually the one I meant to not read. I'll probably read this one just to be quick in some of this. So they turned and departed and put the little ones and the livestock and goods in front of them. They kind of knew, hey, there might be a little bit of trouble. And then when they had gone a distance from the home of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah, the house, were called out, and they overtook the people of Dan. And they shouted to the people of Dan, who turned around and said to Micah, what in a manner do you do that you come to with such a company? And he said to them, you take my gods, and I made... that I made, and the priest, and go away, and what do I have left? How then do you ask me in what manner, what is the manner with you? And the people of Dan said to him, do not let the voice be heard to us unless angry fellows fall upon you, and those your life and the lives of your household. Then the people of Dan went away, and then Micah saw that they were too strong for him. He turned back and went home. Another super interesting one in this, first of all, they come to him and say, why are you coming, right? Why are you doing this? Might makes right in some of these things. And it's interesting, I'll tell you what's a crazy picture to me, is in the entire book of Judges, God has been rescuing his people over and over and over again when they're taken into captivity, when they're taken under bondage, when they're oppressed. And now we have Micah running out trying to save his gods. If your gods can be taken, they're not gods, right? If your gods need saving, They're not gods, is this picture that is being in place. And because might makes right, right in their own eyes, whoever can do it will do it in some of these things. And we'll see, we're right at the end. I'll just make a couple comments. They go into Laish, this unsuspecting people, and they strike them all down with a sword, and they burn the city. And that place where they take the idols, where they take that priest, where they burn this unsuspecting people, that's the foundation of the city of Dan. That they named it after Dan, their ancestor. They take these carved images, they put them there, and then we find out about this. And this is what's wild. I'll leave it on this point. That this is Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Moses. When we talk about those words, like at the beginning of Deuteronomy chapter 12, that was his grandfather. 2 generations. I don't know if Jonathan would have been there or not, but it's possible on some of these kind of things when we look at this. 2 generations. Moses was his grandfather, and now there is a tribe that is left where their allotted land should be. They've established a worship center with idols, taken over a city that God never gave to them, all with a priest with Moses' grandson, who shouldn't be a priest. And that's the beginning of the city of Dan in all these things. So that's story number 1. We'll take a look at the second story, which is even worse by a lot of ways, on Wednesday night to close out the Judges class. So thanks again.